I've been doing a bit of work on think tanks. I've been doing some research on think tanks in developing countries. And I have been collecting some quotes and references from directors of think tanks and scholars on think tanks. And think tanks are always being concerned about their influence and their impact. And many of these scholars and directors would argue that assessing the impact of an individual think tank or even a piece of work by a think tank would be so difficult and so complex and so expensive that it would be pointless to do. Also, it wouldn't provide interesting information for the think tank, useful information for the think tank that the think tank already doesn't know. And there's a story I usually tell. In Chile, during the 1970s and 80s, Pinochet, the government of Pinochet, ran a fairly totalitarian regime. And many think tanks were supported by foreign cooperation. Now, when the new government came along in the 1990s, most of the ministers in the government came from think tanks that had been growing during the 1970s and 80s. However, the analysis of many scholars that have studied Chile, and particularly Jeffrey Poirier, who used to run the Ford Foundation up there, is that the contribution that think tanks made to Chilean politics is not so much intellectual but psychological. Because what they did during the 1980s was they created spaces for the opposition parties to get together, to meet each other, talk to each other, and learn how to govern as a democracy. So it was more about learning to engage with each other than about the ideas that made a difference for Chile. So if we only focus on policy change or one type of impact, we miss out on all those other types of contributions that researchers can make to a society. And if we want to measure all of them, we're going to end up never-ending story. We're going to end up spending too much money and not being able to say anything meaningful about them.